Okay, who brought the dog?
Over the last few years, there have been loads of old movie franchises resurrected for newer audiences. Of these, I was excited to see Star Wars return, only to see them pretty much lose their way with the story, and I even built an entire channel off of my love of the original Jurassic Park. But then you also had things like Alien, Mad Max, Terminator, Godzilla, Predator, and even Rocky come back from years of hiatus. I lined up to see every one of those sequels, but one franchise that I was honestly never that obsessed with happened to be a certain 1980s brand, which returned with a very negatively received remake in 2016 that I didn't even bother seeing. But when it comes to big Hollywood franchises, the original movie has been a pretty big piece of celebrated pop culture that I do remember liking. But I hadn't seen the film in like over 15 years. Last watching it around 2007 or something like that. Well, look, with the newer movie, The Frozen Empire, about to come out, I decided to sit down and watch that first film again, and wow, do I have a lot to say.
It's looking at me.
He's an ugly little spud, isn't he?
I think he can hear you, Ray.
Ghostbusters is a 1984 supernatural comedy film directed by Ivan Reitman. It stars Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis, Ernie Hudson, and Sigourney Weaver. The movie takes place in New York, centering its plot around a few goofy scientists who are desperate for money, and after developing some technology to capture supernatural entities, the plot picks up with a bunch of ghosts wreaking havoc on the town, while an ancient Mesopotamian entity begins to cross over into our world by possessing two people with the help of monster dogs. To say that this is an original story would be a massive understatement. So believe it or not, the movie's story came from Dan Aykroyd's fascination with all things supernatural or paranormal. His whole family seemed to be into that stuff, and he wanted to kind of modernize the old school Abbott and Costello and Bob Hope ideas from Hollywood's past. The movie was originally set in the future, by the way, with a ton of other intergalactic Ghostbuster groups, and it was actually trying to aim for more of like a serious and scary tone. Everything began to change though as the story got more people on board over time, and Aykroyd eventually commented that the three initial characters of the movie, Peter Venkman, Raymond Stantz, and Egon Spengler, were kind of like archetypes for the Scarecrow, Lion, and Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, which I gotta say, that's kind of funny to think about. Now look guys, even though I've never been the biggest fan of this franchise itself, I have always really liked the first Ghostbusters. I was born like 10 years after this came out though, so I wasn't exactly caught up on like the cultural impact that it had. You know, there's certain things like Ninja Turtles that carried over into the 90s, and I actually did watch some of the Extreme Ghostbusters TV show, but the initial pop of popularity from this brand was over way before my time. Still, whenever I did watch this movie growing up, it was genuinely funny to me.
Now, don't look directly into the trap.
I looked at the trap, Ray.
And a lot of that comes from, and in my opinion at least, the very simple story. This isn't an overly complicated film that's hard to follow at all, and at the end of the day, I was kind of surprised at how basic the actual plot was once I went back and rewatched it. Ghostbusters is a very straightforward, spooky comedy film, filled with great special effects and hilarious dialogue that I personally think it just makes the whole movie kind of like, I don't know man, it's just a seriously entertaining movie experience. A lot of that centers around Bill Murray, who is nonstop funny in this movie, and his character is kind of this compelling guy that just doesn't care that, he doesn't care about what anyone else thinks and wants to do whatever he wants to do. His relationship with Sigourney Weaver is awesome in the movie, and the fact that this was after she had already made a name for herself in Alien, it's extremely cool to look back on. She really did establish herself as a major force in the science fiction genre, and Ghostbusters is really good at showing her play a much less aggressive side of her acting range, particularly when it got followed up just 2 years later with Aliens.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Ernie Hudson is great as Winston. I loved him in The Crow, I loved him in Leviathan, and I love him in Shark Attack. I gotta talk about that one by myself. I actually did a whole thing with Tony from Hack the Movies about that one. Anyways, this is, in my opinion, his best role. When he starts to bring up the end of days with Dan Aykroyd in the film, and they talk about the dead rising and everything towards the middle of the movie, things get super fun. You start to realize this film is gonna have one seriously big finale, and, it just seems really cool.
57th Street. I'm in a hurry, so let's not dawdle.
Now, of course, everyone else in this movie is great too. Egon Spengler delivers dialogue so straightforward and deadpan that it's always funny, and Lewis is one of the goofiest characters in a movie you'll probably ever see. Ray is great, and because the whole movie itself was actually an idea from Dan Aykroyd, it's cool to see him bring this thing to life in the movie as not only someone working in front of the camera, but also behind it. In fact, I don't think there's anything about the original Ghostbusters I can genuinely complain about. What you're looking at here is pretty much the definition of everyone working as hard as they can to make the greatest product possible, and you can just see it when you watch the thing. The directing, the writing, the story itself, the monster designs, and the music, it's just so shocking to go back and look at the movie that started this whole franchise, because it is so basic and so simple in its story that it's kind of amazing.
We're ready to believe you.
The first Ghostbusters is one of the funniest pop culture, big name comedy, spooky things of the 1980s, and it holds up really well today. I was kind of surprised because, like I said again, I hadn't seen this movie in 15 years, never totally understood why so many people were obsessed with the brand. I got things like Jurassic Park and Star Wars, but Ghostbusters was always kind of why? Why are you so obsessed with that? Rewatching it, it's a really good movie, and I always knew it was good, but this go around, I think I finally understand what made it tick. And that's kind of just because they were making something that was good in and of itself. It didn't need a big franchise or some sort of long outstanding brand deal thing to make everybody love it. It was just good because it was good. It was very basic, simple ghost story style comedy with great actors, and it paid off. The first Ghostbusters is extremely funny and holds up very well, especially with the more quiet moments of character humor. That stuff is great.
Some creature.
We never talk anymore.
You know, after doing my own research into ancient religions and how they relate to the Bible and the Divine Council worldview, supernatural stuff, you know what I'm talking about, I was actually surprised to see how much there was that was crossing over into, of all things, the first Ghostbusters movie. So while the film is of course comedic fiction, there are ideas here that I thought were really fun to look over after diving into the archaeological record of Sumerian and Mesopotamian cultures. Winston and Ray talk about the Book of Revelation early on in the movie, but the actual idea of rebellious gods coming back to wreak havoc reminded me of Psalm 82, where God passes judgment over the other gods. I said, you are gods, but you will die like men. That's a pretty metal passage, by the way, along with other stuff in Exodus, like God saying, against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. I am the Lord.
Do you believe in God?
Never met him.
Yeah, well, I do.
Also, the whole movie's usage of these supernaturally altered people that have been elevated to bring forth destruction, it reminded me a lot of Genesis 6, where the sons of God came into the daughters of man and brought forth the Nephilim. Look guys, I am really into this stuff, and this is actually something that it's in a lot of ancient religions like Mesopotamian, Sumer, Babylonian. I was kind of shocked that Ghostbusters had that stuff in there. Pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie.
Are you a god?
It's ironically pretty well researched for its monsters, which, by the way, look extremely cool. The best looking creature design, in my opinion, is by far the Terror Dogs. These guys are nothing short of iconic, and their usage in the movie is hilarious, especially with how they relate to Lewis. I tell you, man, it's just awesome at the fact that they were able to create such gnarly creatures and then use them for comedic effects so perfectly in a movie like this. It's kind of amazing, but look, there's also monsters that roam about on the streets, like a ghoulish winged creature and a zombie cab driver, and look, of course, everybody's favorite mascot, Slimer. The Slimer puppet is one of the most popular pieces of special effects character from the 80s, and it was done by having a guy wear a suit with blacked out leggings. Other people operated cables for his mouth, and they eventually composited him to the shots where he would fly around and spook people. The monster would kind of become the brand icon of Ghostbusters, and everyone remembers his first scene where the group has to liberate a hotel from his haunting. What follows is a clever montage of the Ghostbusters rounding up ghosts and people showering them with applause. Casey Kasem, Larry King, and others all talk about how popular the boys are becoming, and the music by Ray Parker Jr. It's excellent. This movie has one of the greatest soundtracks for 1980s big pop culture films ever, and you know it immediately whenever you hear it.
Stand aside, please.
Then of course you've got following scenes of absolute monstrous intrusions by creatures and demonic hands and stuff that makes the movie uber original in how it tells its story. This thing is kind of awesome in every regard. All in all, if I had to really sit down and think of my own personal favorite scene from the film, it would have to be the final battle at the end, which I'm not going to reveal here, but you probably already know what I'm talking about. Just know that things get extremely serious, and the Ghostbusters find themselves on top of a building with an entity from an ancient religion trying to destroy the world. The movie just gets visually dark and brutally cool to look at.
Nobody steps on a church in my town!
The action, jokes, special effects, and dialogue are all on point. The movie knocks this stuff out of the park, and I love the fact that it takes the material seriously when incorporating it into its own little lore. They didn't have to do that. Ghostbusters is the kind of movie that I think you cannot watch for years, even decades, much like a Star Wars or a Jurassic Park or maybe one of the original Terminator movies. And then you revisit it and just remember how good it was back in the day. This is a great time, and I had a blast rewatching it. Again, hadn't seen it in years, never understood why people loved the whole franchise. As an adult, I think I get it. Now, to tell you all the truth, I don't really have the greatest understanding of the whole Ghostbusters canon. I never sat down and watched any of the TV series from start to finish, so I don't know if they count in the timeline, and I've also only seen Ghostbusters 2 twice in my whole life. There is a reason for that, which I'll go into later, but as for the first Ghostbusters, I think the movie's great. I think it's obvious. You should go watch it again if you haven't already. I actually did see Ghostbusters Afterlife. I saw that in theaters, and I'll talk about that eventually in the future. The 2016 film I have no intention of ever watching. No, you're not going to convince me to do it.
The power of penny compels you!
But look guys, as far as the 1984 original, this is a really good movie, man. There's no way I think I could ever look at the first Ghostbusters and not have a good time. I was honestly surprised to see the whole ancient god context brought into the film, and in fact I do think it would make for a funny scene in the sequel if one of the gods gets laughed at by Jesus or something and then quickly destroyed. I don't know. The character performances are great, the humor is solid, the special effects are done with great stop motion and puppet effects. Look man, I love the movie, I had a really good time. I think all of you guys will too. Whole bunch of speculation into where they're going to go in the future. I think Dan Aykroyd wants to do a whole new trilogy. Where were you in the 90s when they were trying to do Ghostbusters Go to Hell or whatever that movie was called? Which, by the way, I need to talk about that. That sounds brutal. Anyways, guys, those are all just my own thoughts on Ghostbusters. Good movie. Definitely loved it. We're going to be talking about the sequels soon. Personally, like I said, the ending is the best stuff in the movie, but everything else is really funny too. With that being said, I'd love to hear what all of you guys think about the film. What's your favorite scene in Ghostbusters? What's your least favorite thing about the movie? And did you even watch that one from 2016? When that trailer dropped, dude, nobody liked it. But hey, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be on the 1984 original, I'd love to hear all about it in the comments down below. Let me tell you something, brother. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it, and if you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can be updated when I put out new videos. God bless you all. Christ is King. I hope you all enjoyed your time, and as always, take it easy.